Yeah.
So, all right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Steven Smith. I'm a registered dietitian. This is one of the first videos that I'm starting. And one of the first people I selected was Kate Deering, and she's somebody that I've been reading her work for a while now. I highly recommend her book, How to Heal Your Metabolism. I recommend it to every one of my clients, including my male clients especially. And you know, Kate is basically an amazing resource. So she's taken a lot of complex work by Dr. Ray Peat and has basically put it into a format that's a lot easier to understand for the average person, because as anybody who's read Ray Peat's work knows, it's very complex and it's hard to break it all down. So as far as Kate's background, she has over 20 years of experience as a personal trainer. She is CHEK certified and a holistic wellness coach since 2008. And also, she's also been involved in Olympic lifting as well. And that's one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you, Kate, because there's so many misconceptions out there in the fitness community and the fitness culture, and a lot of times it steers people the wrong way and actually does more harm than good. So
that definitely happens, yes.
Yeah. So, to give you a little bit of background for me, I come from a sports background. I rode BMX bikes ever since I was the age of 12 years old to about 17, 18. And during that time, I would come home from school after high school, ride my bike like 5 miles to my friend's house, and then we would ride another 5 miles to a local skate park and BMX for like a good 4 or 5 hours and then ride home. The summers were filled with an excessive amount of exercise and a lot of BMXing, about 9 or 10 hours a day at a camp called Camp Woodward in Pennsylvania. And it's where everybody goes who's involved with skateboarding or BMX. They go there to meet the pros, get autographs, and also improve their skills. So basically, I got involved in the nutrition field because this lack of care of nutrition. You know, when you're young, you can go hours and hours without food, get very little sleep, and you're very resilient. And for me, it all hit me one summer at Camp Woodward when all of a sudden I started getting insomnia, and I also started experiencing fatigue and also sexual health problems as well. And this is all coming from somebody who's 17 years old. So after I did doctor hopping, I went from doctor to doctor to see what was wrong with me. Most doctors said it was all in my head. So eventually I went to a urologist. He checked my testosterone levels, and sure enough, they were around 200, which is very low for somebody that age. That's like more of a level of an 80-year-old man. So long story short, I tried different diets because at this point I realized that mainstream medicine wasn't going to help me. Their only option for me was going on testosterone therapy, and as a young man I was like, no way, I don't need that. So to make a long story short, I don't want to ramble here, I finally, after following like low carb diets without any success for years, I finally found Ray Peat's work, delved into it, and after learning about, how physiology works, I looked back and I realized, okay, it wasn't that I was on some strict diet back then. It wasn't that, you hear a lot of the typical causes of hormonal problems in the nutrition communities because of some kind of low-carb diet. But for me, it was a lack of nutrition, basically, and over excessive amounts of exercise. So over the years, I have found that even to this day, especially like if you're strength training, the stronger and stronger you get, the harder it is to recover. So that's my background. If you would like, you can go over, some of your background and the findings that you've found.
Well, I'm not a BMX biker, but I have a similar kind of history. It all came to fruition to me because I've been an over-exerciser all my life. And for women in the fitness industry, we basically have a preconception of what we should look like. The fitness industry has an idea of what we should look like. And I guess that puts the pressure on us to maintain a certain weight and a certain look. So since I've been in this industry basically since I've been 22, and so, the overall thought is you exercise like crazy and you eat restrictively to maintain the ideal lean body mass that for a woman, which is really not super healthy. But I did that for a good 20 years on a bunch of different diets. But ultimately it came to just trying to stay lean any way I could. And that same thing kind of resulted. I hit a wall. I started having some metabolic issues, skin issues, digestive issues, sleep issues, hormonal issues. I've never had anything like PMS my entire life, but all of a sudden I was having a lot of hormonal issues, and I think I was probably about 38. So at the time, I kind of thought it was maybe because I was approaching 40. I thought I was doing everything right. I had been on a bunch of different diets at the time. My diet wasn't horrible, but it was certainly low carb. And that's when I also found Dr. Pete's research and started to understand actual physiology better as far as it maintained to metabolism. And started to realize what the body actually needs to run optimally. And basically all of those things I wasn't doing, and I was just stressing the system even more by all of the over-exercising I was doing without supporting it with enough nutrition. And so that's kind of where my story started.
Okay. So yeah, very similar. I want to point out that especially to all the male clients that I work with, a lot of them come to me they're young, especially now. In their 20s, early 30s, sometimes even late teens, and they ask me like, why is this happening to me? I'm so young. I think there's a misconception where people think that these hormonal problems can only happen in the elderly. Have you found that as well?
Certainly. I don't work with a lot of adolescent people, male or female. However, I certainly come in contact with enough girls and guys who start having hormonal issues, whether it's women who have PMS or if it's guys that have low testosterone levels or have libido issues or have fatigue. And I think it is the result of a lot of our society, the stressors we put upon these kids at this early age, the abundance of social media and everything that is kind of coming at them. There's a lot of stress for teenagers now that we didn't used to have. And then there's a lack of sunlight. There's lack of getting outside. Maybe they're involved in a sport and their nutrition isn't optimal. So all of these things can start happening. And it doesn't matter. You're probably more resilient at that age. You can certainly take more and you're not going to totally fall off the edge. However, you're going to start to have systems that are affected when your body's not getting supported.
Okay. So let's talk about basically when you found Dr. Pete's work, what was it about his work that convinced you that it was the right path to follow?
I think the starting point for me was when I started taking my temperature and pulse. And there was never any, other than doing my body measurements and skin fold calibers and weight, there wasn't a test that I usually could utilize that told me if I was healthy or not. And as soon as I could realize, hey, we should be warm. When we are utilizing energy well, we will be warmer. And our pulse should be more optimal, 75 to 90 beats a minute. And when I started taking, and I started diving into his research, I think my pulse was like 55, and my temperature was in the 96s. I've done a lot of endurance events. I've certainly done tons of cardiovascular activity. You know, I taught boot camps. And so, you know, that was a lot of my background. I probably did at least 10 hours of activity a week. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, I'm pretty, and I was. I mean, I was just a cold individual. I have been since college. I can remember just being the coldest one in my dorm area. And because I was also the one most obsessed with exercise and calorie counting. So, you know, it was all of a sudden, all of these things started to make sense in my head as to what had been going on with me for the last 25 years.
Okay. So as we said before, like the main point of this talk is just to go over some of the damaging effects of exercise, because my focus with a lot of people I work with is try to convince them that it's okay to rest. And so how have you dealt with people like that are just exercise addicts, and it's extremely difficult to convince them that it's okay to take time off?
Right. Well, I think people have to be convinced themselves, so I think it's the best to just give them information or let them get information and help them understand how the body works. So if your workout is tanking your temp and pulse, so I say, hey, take your temp and pulse prior to your workout, then take it 20 minutes post-workout and see what happens. And if your temp and pulse are tanking, well, then you're not getting the metabolic effects that you're looking for, because you want to, you know, a workout should ultimately make you feel better. And as long as you're providing it with enough nutrition, it can withstand going through, you know, an energy depletion that you're going to utilize to get through that workout. So if you're tanking it, then you're depleting your body too much, and you're actually creating more stress than you're adding to help. You know, so if you keep doing that, you're not going to get the benefits like increased muscle mass or whatever it is you're looking for, because you're trying to do it within the body that's too stressed.
Okay. And with that being said, like, how do you help clients find the right amount of exercise for them? Because this is something that I ignored, especially myself, for the longest time. You'll see these cookie cutter programs online, like a good example is like Strong Lifts 5x5 or Jim Wendler 531, or, you know, whatever program it is. For me, what I found is like a lot of these programs I just couldn't follow to a T. Like after a certain period of time, maybe like a couple months, as the weights got progressively heavier, I started getting more into like an overtrained state. And so that's something that a lot of coaches and the people who design these programs don't really give people the tools to learn when that, you know, like the biofeedback that you get.
Right. I mean, because most systems don't give you, that's why temperature and pulse is so effective, because it's something that you can utilize daily and you can test yourself daily. And you can also monitor things like your sleep, your mood, your overall energy. You know, a workout, you shouldn't walk away from a workout and feel absolutely trashed, even though they might preach that in some areas of fitness, like that's how hard you need to work. And it's certainly, if you're younger and you're more resilient, you can probably recover faster. However, that shouldn't be the goal of your program. The goal is, if you're trying to gain muscle mass, you do not need to work till failure. You do not need to crush yourself so you can't walk. And the people that do that on a continual basis and usually have growth, I would probably say are on some sort of hormones, testosterone, growth hormone, something that's helping them recover faster. Versus just, you know, them, unless, again, they're younger, they're resilient, and they're eating enough. If you are eating an adequate amount of calories, and for a teenage boy, that usually means a lot, especially if you're involving some sort of strength training program into your day. So, you know, again, it's all based on how does your body respond, how do you feel, how's your temp and pulse, and do you enjoy it? That needs to be also a big factor in any sort of exercise program.
Okay. As far as, I really want to get your take on male clients, because this is something that, since I get so many male clients with low testosterone, a lot of them have, what I noticed is, specifically they have a history of excessive exercise. So, and the funny thing, well, it's not funny, but a lot of people associate weightlifting with higher testosterone levels,
Mm-hmm.
but in actuality, a lot of the people that come to me, they have a background of powerlifting or something like that, like strength sports. And so I kind of wanted to ask your take on that. Like, what have you seen when it comes to can people damage their health with weightlifting just as easily as like endurance exercise?
I think you can overdo anything if you're not properly supported with enough nutrition. Because for your, so what you'll see a lot of times in the bodybuilding world or people are trying to get bigger is they eat an abundance of protein and not enough carbohydrates to support the growth of their muscles. Because even though protein is the foundation of the building blocks of your muscles, it requires a lot of energy to build. So if you're not supporting that with enough healthy carbohydrates, then you're just going to kind of go in this circle and it's going to be more stress to your system than anabolic to your system. So, yes, usually if you have more muscle mass because testosterone is produced in the muscle tissue, you'll usually see higher levels of testosterone.
Okay.
However, like with anything, if the overall system of the body is too stressed, whether it's from too stressful workouts or other stressors in life that are compounding on that, then even if you're producing it, it can be converting to estrogen because that's what it does in the stress state. So you kind of have to take the whole picture and look at them and their life and what's going on and the overall stress, as I call it, the stress bucket of their life to see and analyze if they're already super stressed, then adding a heavy training program into their life is just going to be too much because, lifting heavy weights is very stressful to your nervous system. That's why it's a huge glucose consumer, even though like you might not be aerobically burning tons of calories, but because lifting weights has a huge effect on your nervous system, that's why people can just be shot just by lifting on a heavy day. You just got to increase caloric intake. You got to make sure you're in the right state. If you're having a low energy day, that's not a good day to hit it hard.
Okay. And then something I wanted to ask is, for some of the male clients that I have, basically they feel like they're invincible. So there's this stigma in society that, men and women have different amounts of stress tolerance and that men can tolerate all this exercise and, work 80 hours a week and come home and do CrossFit and things like that. And what I consistently find is that I don't think there's any difference in stress tolerance. I think both men and women are equally, screwed when it comes to overtraining. And the only difference that I've seen is the level of body fat that it affects. If you get down to a certain body fat, men can be a little bit lower than women.
Absolutely.
But right. What have you seen when it comes to male clients destroying themselves with exercise? Have you seen that to be pretty similar?
100%. I work with a lot of type A males. Now, I would say they're usually in their 30s and 40s. But they, and I work with men that they've done chronic dieting. They've gone super hypocaloric, 1,400 calories, lost a lot of weight. Some that have gotten in a very stressful job and just don't eat enough or eat the wrong foods and just tank their libidos. So again, no, I don't think there's a difference. I think men and women might have different stressors. I think women are trying to be super moms and work and then be everything to everybody. And then you have the man who is working 80 hours a week to keep up with the Joneses and still do all of the workout, And I think overall our society is putting too much on people. And so it's hard to maintain that. And I think you can kind of get into your 20s and deal, 30s possibly. And then you hit your 40s, and that's a lot of what I see is they tank out. And so at that point in time, even though you're like, I feel like I need to do these hard workouts because they psychologically make me feel better and they kind of get that adrenaline rush. Again, I'm like, it's your decision, but take your temperature and pulse. And what are you trying to achieve here? If you're trying to heal your body and self get better, then that right now, and I always tell them right now, it's not the best choice, or you need to go less, or you need to go, do less weight, less time, less intensity. whatever it is, until we can get your body responding properly. And then as you get healthier, you can start adding that back in. Because I'm all about, if you like intense workouts and that makes you happy, to include them in. But if you're not getting the proper responses and they're making you feel worse, then what are you doing? Then at that point in time, that's an addiction, right? Now, if you're doing something and it's making you worse, but you keep doing it, then you have to look at what it is going on with you mentally.
Right. Now, you mentioned temperature and pulse. For those that don't understand how exercise can affect those metrics, can you just explain that?
Well, when you do a workout, your pulse and temperature are going to go up, just based on activity, because you are burning and utilizing more calories. But afterwards, in a state of recovery, it still should maintain. Meaning, if you're at a 98.6, you're probably going to get warmer after your workout program. But ultimately, your body should be able to come back into a normal state. If it tanks down, meaning let's say it drops into a 97 temperature, basically you probably utilized too much of your body's reserves, and now you probably put it in a stress state. So it basically shows up as becoming more efficient. So when you have a lower temperature and pulse, it's basically saying your body's more efficient, meaning you're utilizing less calories because your body's worried that you're not going to provide it either with enough energy, or you're going to stress it too much, so it needs to conserve energy. So and that shows up as lower temp and pulse. So somebody that has a warmer temp and pulse, their body is actually more wasteful, meaning you're utilizing more calories just in the resting state. And how they're being utilized is usually to run the systems of your body, your libido, your digestion, your hormonal system. All those things require energy. And when you become deficient or suppressed, those things start to not get energy. And that's when you start seeing constipation, low libido, respiration issues, and the inability to gain muscle tissue. So, and you can kind of monitor that, and it all coincides with temperature and pulse. The warmer people are, and the higher pulse without being too high, they seem to work better, and everything seems to work better. And those that have a low temperature and pulse, like an endurance athlete, I have never met an endurance athlete that has a libido. Mm-hmm. Not one, right?
Yeah.
It tanks on them, So for them, it's like, and so a lot of them get on testosterone or take Viagra, which are all these things that are just going to create more havoc on their system long term. It might work in an immediate sense, but long term, it's going to cause more damage.
Right. And then it becomes just a Band-Aid, because if stress or if excessive amounts of cortisol is what's causing erectile dysfunction problems or low libido, and you're just giving Viagra or TRT, you're not actually getting the treatment or recovery that you need.
Correct.
Right.
Right. In fact, you're probably just stressing the system even more.
Right. Yeah. So as far as pulse goes, that's something that I've struggled with. And I know if you go on the Ray Peat forum, what you'll notice is a lot of people improve their temperatures relatively quickly, but pulse kind of like falls behind. It takes a lot longer. So, like when I started, just to go back to during my recovery, my pulse was like in the 50s. And so that's kind of what turned me on to Pete's work, and also people like Matt Stone, because right off the bat, it was something that I could see, like, okay, my pulse is in the 50s, my temperature was like 95 point, like borderline hypothermic. But even to this day, like, it's still, might be in the upper 60s. So what it seems like is I'm still recovering even after years of following Ray Peat's work, and a lot of people seem to be in the same boat. So do you have any advice to give to people that have a hard time?
I definitely noticed it, and I think if you are still a fit person, you will still see it as a lower level. Me personally, pulse was certainly the last thing, and I would get it up, and then I would still participate in an endurance event, and I would literally see it drop back down. Not to what it used to be, but I would definitely see a decrease. Certainly, the more aerobically fit I became, and then I would recover and it would come back up. I don't do essentially any cardiovascular activity anymore. I minimize my workouts. I actually do more kind of meditative type workout, or not even workout, meditative type things, yoga, stretching, and see how my body responds. And now I can get my pulse up to about 80-ish, right? And maintain that. But it took quite a long time, and when I was still doing a bit of, a good bit of physical activity, it was staying in the 70s for sure.
Okay. Now, I can tell you this, during times when I'm sick, and I always ask my clients this because this is such a funny thing. You wouldn't think this is the case, but I've noticed times when I'm myself and with clients that I work with, if we're sick at a certain time and when we actually take time off of work, like take a few days off or whatever, we actually notice an improvement in libido. So how do you explain something like that? Like for me, I feel like it's your body's actually getting the rest that it needs.
Yeah, I would say 100% that. That's why people can go on vacation. They have, and that might be saying, well, we're in this place. I'm like, yeah, because you're resting, the stressors are gone, the libido is going to increase. You have to remember your body's number one thing it's supposed to do for you is keep you alive. Number one is survival. Procreation or, having sex is not number one, even though some men might think that is.
Right.
So those things become hindered when your body is trying to keep you alive and, and keep you going. And it knows, like, I've got to get through this day. And it's super stressful. I deal with all these people. So testosterone, libido are all going to be affected. When you're then laying around, you're sleeping, you're getting food, you're getting rest. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, I'm just here healing. I'm not running around all day long, doing all this crazy stuff, working out. And now, guess what? It shows up. And so I think that's a good measure of probably that you need more rest or more food or less stress or better reactions to stress or whatever.
Okay. And I always like to point out it's kind of like yin and yang. Like you have sympathetic nervous system, which is, you're waking up by an alarm clock, you're going to work, driving an hour each way to and from work, coming home, doing CrossFit. That's all sympathetic activity. And then you're also worrying about the next day or whatever deadline you have. And in your brain, you can actually cause that. And then on the parasympathetic side, which is the opposite, that's where you're not worrying, you're not working, you're not stressed out. So I feel like a lot of people, if you put that into perspective, that they're both like pretty opposite systems, then it's easier to understand.
Yeah, I like to say the sympathetic is your fight or flight. Your parasympathetic is your rest and digest.
Right.
So, you can do those things in those areas. So, parasympathetic activity would be resting, sleeping, meditation, more yoga-based, enjoying a good meal. And then, but most of us or society, a lot of people are in that sympathetic state all day long, every day. And it serves a purpose, right? So when you need more fuel, it basically tells your body, hey, we need more fuel because our body's stressed. And then it should come back down. Like we always say, if you're running from a lion, you want to have that sympathetic system kick in. But then when you're done, it should go back into its normal state. Unfortunately, most people are running from a lion every single day, whether it's their marriage or their work or there's traffic or social media, school, whatever. It's just that chronic state. And everybody's in it. Teenagers, college kids, every single person you talk to, because that's what we have been led to believe is the way we should live.
Okay. So, I work with a lot of people that are on really restrictive diets, some ex-vegans, and more frequently now, like ex-low-carb or carnivore. I've only had a couple carnivore people because it's such a new fad. But I actually myself, and it's funny, Danny Roddy, I didn't know until recently, like he did that as well, like way back when. I think it was gosh, it was like 2000, probably 2010.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think he went zero carb.
Yeah, so I did that too. I was reading the same forums he did. So I did that. I did very low carb for about 2 years when I was reading books from Lauren Cordain and Mark Sisson, and that if you eat over 150 grams of carbs a day, you'll have insidious weight gain and it'll affect your insulin. So it's all these things that it sounds really enticing, but then when you actually try it, it might feel good at first because, you know, it can feel good when your body's breaking down, but then sooner or later, like, it gets you. And I just remember one day I was working at, and this was actually all during the same time I was trying to fix my hormonal problems. So looking back, it was really just adding fuel to the fire because I already had years of insomnia at this point, from just stress and overexercise. And then I thought that if I lower my insulin levels, that'll help my testosterone somehow. So I just remember one day I was working out, and after like literally 2 warm-up sets of, I think it was power cleans, I felt like I was going to faint. And I was also doing like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I fainted twice. I remember like people had to wake me up because like I fainted because I was on this really restrictive diet. And you know, if you think of the mechanisms, there's probably a few things at play. You know, maybe my sodium wasn't there, maybe I had hypoglycemia. But anyway, my point in bringing that up is that a lot of men have low testosterone from low carb diets. And I've worked with them, and it's so hard to convince them otherwise that it's the wrong approach. But what would you say? Like, why? What are some of the reasons that a low carb diet can negatively affect your sex hormones?
Well, for one, you know, you need cholesterol is basically the foundation of all your steroidal hormones, and for it to be converted into steroidal hormones, you need thyroid hormone, and basically most of your thyroid hormone is coming from the liver, and for it to be produced, you need glucose. So low glucose is going to affect your T3 levels, which is going to affect your cholesterol levels, which is going to affect your steroidal levels. So that alone is going to break down the process of you getting the right hormones. So eating a bunch of meat with a lack of carbohydrates, now your body will probably convert some of that animal protein or whatever kind of protein you're eating into glucose through gluconeogenesis, because your body is super cool that it will, again, try to keep you alive. So it has all these processes in place in case you do not have enough sugar in the system. One of that being breaking down non-carbohydrate sources into carbohydrates to maintain blood sugar levels. But again, your body's out to survive. So the places that are going to get the glucose are basically your brain, your red blood cells. Those are going to get the majority of that needed energy. Things like your hormonal system or hormones, that's going to be much lower on the list, so they're going to be affected. So just my experience is men just slowly increasing their carbohydrate levels, not doing too much initially because they will gain weight, but slowly increasing that, their libido will come back in, some a month and some a few months. It all depends on how what their system is doing and how their body responds. But ultimately, that's going to be the big, when you actually look at physiologically how your hormones produce, glucose is a big factor in there. Thyroid hormone is a big factor in there, and they need carbohydrates. Okay.
Let's see. What about the negative effects of cortisol from gluconeogenesis? Because that's something that a lot of people don't think about. But through the process of gluconeogenesis, cortisol is actually mediating that.
Right. I mean, you have gluconeogenesis because your body has increased levels of stress hormones. I mean, you're not going to go through gluconeogenesis unless you have lack of sugar, unless there's lack of glucose. There's a secondary response to regulate you, because you have to have a constant flow of blood sugar, which is sugar. So by you depleting that, your body's going to break down tissue through elevated levels of cortisol to turn into sugar so that your body can stay regulated. And so if you're in the chronic state, by depleting yourself of sugar, you're going to have a chronic state of cortisol levels. And again, the catecholamine hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, they feel really good. People deplete carbohydrates, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm so alert, I feel so good, I have all this energy, I'm really clear-minded. Yeah, because adrenaline does that. And it'll do it for a while, and depending how restrictive you are and how young you are, you can maintain that for years until people crash. And when they crash hard. And then now there's the recovery period, which could take also years. And
I think Ray Pete's touched on this before, but what you just mentioned, I always like to, I'm always reminded by the analogy of cocaine and other amphetamines when it comes to low carb diets, because they work on the same, kind of in the same mechanism. So, cocaine, amphetamines, and the like, they all increase your adrenaline and make you feel, it's excitatory to your brain. So it's,
Yeah, it feels good, right?
Doesn't mean it's healthy.
And that's why exercise extremes, they too. I mean, if you exercise hard without pushing yourself over, exercise makes you feel good because you've increased levels of stress hormones, right? Like that euphoria, that's what the runner's high is. It's all stress hormones.
Okay.
Right? And so it's not because there's some magic hormone in you that it's feel good. It's stress hormones feel good. And again, if you recover optimally, I'm not saying don't do those things, but as long as you support it with optimal nutrition and enough rest to keep your body going, then fine, then do those things. It's when you push it too hard, right? So the person that's like, I'm working 80 hours a week, and I have to work out every day so I feel normal. And I'm like, those might be the times when you work out a little bit less or deplete, so that you're not pushing it. Again, it all is based on the person and their resilience level. But if you're really starting to lose sleep and you're working really hard and your diet's not good because you're out of town and you're traveling, probably not a good time to do hard workouts.
Okay. So when you started researching Ray Pete's work, were you still really involved in exercise, excessive amounts of it at the same time?
Initially, yeah. It took me a while to stop exercising as much initially. I changed my diet a lot and really fast, and so I kind of got a lot of, I went from chicken and tons of vegetables to all of a sudden all this dairy and saturated fat and a bunch of fruit. So my body went haywire. Because when I hear something, I'm like, let's do it. And I changed everything, and I would never recommend to do that to anybody.
Yeah.
So it took about 6 months for my body to balance out. I was still maintaining a good amount of exercise at that point in time. And then I trained for a 150-mile bike ride. And then when I stopped that exercise protocol, I put on a bunch of weight. And I think it was just the response from all of that exercise, and I obviously had pushed my body back into this suppressed state. And so what happened to me was a few months later, I tore my medial meniscus, and all of a sudden I couldn't run anymore. And all of a sudden my weight fixed itself. I've dropped 10 pounds in a month. My body felt way better. And all of a sudden I was like, there's like a missing component. And I just realized I overstressed myself.
Okay.
Completely. But that was a big awakening for me. And it's, sadly, that's how a lot of people learn, is they get injured. Then they can't work out, and they realize how much that was probably not helping them, their workouts.
It's kind of like when you get sick and you start feeling better by getting the recovery. Yeah.
Exactly.
So what was it that convinced you that excessive amounts of exercise was not right? You kind of just answered it, but I guess what I'm thinking of is there something that you read that was like solidified it in your mind?
Well, I think just understanding that, exercise is still stress on the system. I was brought up, I've been in the fitness industry all my life. And so my belief system prior to that was all exercise is good. I'll never stop exercising. It makes me feel good. And it does. It has all of those effects. It definitely helps with my stress level. I just feel better when I do it. But I would also exercise to the point where I would be in pain. I barely walk, and then it got to a point that it was inhibiting me from losing this additional 10 pounds.
Okay.
Whether it's from inflammation or whatever. Because as soon as I decreased my activity, all of a sudden, again, I like to say everyone has a stress bucket. And when you have a lot of stress in your stress bucket, doing exercise all the time might be too much, And at this point, I was in my 40s. And so I'm sure there was some body shifting at some point. But I realized now, maybe, I could, in my 20s, I could do all that and it wouldn't affect me. However, I realized I'm like, I want to be supportive to my body. I don't want to beat it up constantly, which I had done for many, many, many years. And so doing less and being more gentle at times felt better to me. And my body temperature stayed up and I wasn't feeling inflamed. And so I think just the result of not doing it was the biggest answer for me.
I pretty much came to the same conclusions in that regard. One thing that I read one time, which really solidified it for me, was a study. And I'm not sure if Ray mentions this. I know he talks about how exercise lowers T3 like transiently.
Yes.
But there was a study. It's pretty old. I think it's from the 90s. It's by a researcher named Louck, Louck. And they basically took women, a group of women who were endurance training, and they put them on varying levels of calories. So like one group was 40 calories per kilogram, which is usually like in excess. The other group was like 25 calories per kilogram, and then one was 10. And incrementally, like as soon as the women got under 25 calories per kilogram, their thyroid hormone, like their T3 levels just started dropping to the point where at the end of the study, the ones who were getting 10 calories per kilogram, by the end of the study had like undetectable levels of T3.
Right.
Whereas anything 25 calories per kilogram and over, they were actually able to sustain their T3 production even in the face of endurance exercise. So that's one of the things that spoke to me personally, because it like really made me realize that that's how I got into that same situation. Like when I was doing all that exercise, I was like really, really skinny at the time. Like, a skinny 17-year-old skateboard BMXer, not caring about nutrition, not getting, eating a couple times a day. So,
and I think, and even going the low carb approach, Dr. Adkins, which is kind of the beginning of all this madness, he even states in his book that, this kind of diet will lower T3 levels. So he's already giving you, how important carbohydrates are in the thyroid as far as production. And again, the stress of exercise. When you think about it, when you have increased stress, thyroid production will always lower.
Right.
And as your thyroid starts to improve and your stress level comes down, they work inversely to each other. So just know, and that's why when you work out, when you're doing sets, rest in between. It shouldn't be breathless exercise. You should be able to recover, and that should be the goal.
And it's funny that you mentioned that about low carb gurus talking about how their diet lowers T3, because I've heard several of them use that as an argument that you're using fat for fuel. So they rationalize it, and this is something that I talked about when I was on the Stop Being Confused About Health podcast. It's this cognitive dissonance. Like, on one hand, they want good hormone levels, but they still want to maintain that low-carb diet because insulin's the enemy.
Right.
And it just can't work that way. It's not how the body works. So some of them rationalize it and say, okay, we know by the research your T3 levels will drop, but it doesn't matter. The body was designed to work that way. Well, yeah, I mean, it was designed to work that way, but unfortunately for them, it's not working optimally.
Right. Again, it's all about survival, right?
Right.
And I think anything the body can do doesn't mean it should do it all the time. And I think that's why you need to study what a resting and healthy person does, and what an optimal diet is. You can also look at any culture that lives a long life, and none of them are restricting carbohydrates.
Right. So you mentioned rest between sets. This is something that I found was a super powerful tool for me with weight training. I came across some research that showed that basically the longer you rest between sets, like the stronger people and more muscle they gained. So, how do you gauge how much rest somebody needs between sets for strength training?
I would say you want to be able to maintain nose breathing the entire time. So if you're doing a set and all of a sudden you feel out of breath, then you need to rest until you can basically go back to maintaining nose breathing at a normal pace, and then you can resume. Which for some people could be, because I even have clients I work with, and they start doing a set and they start mouth breathing and they want to go right into the next. I'm like, nope. I mean, you have to wait until you can talk and you can breathe through your nose. If you start mouth breathing, we wait.
Yeah.
So I usually like to use that, but I think you're right. I mean, a lot of people don't, have maybe 2 hours and wait 5 to 10 minutes in between this heavy set, and I think honestly, the heavier you go, the more you need to rest.
Yeah, like for me, it's all like context. It's basically like the smaller muscle groups. Just my view on it, they need less rest than the compounds like squats and deadlifts. And for me, I'll take like as much rest as I need, which is normally like 5 minutes between sets for those.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something that a lot of people that ask me about my exercise advice when it comes to, like, in the context of recovering the hormones, they get upset because they feel like they're not working out if they're not out of breath.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's what we've all been taught. And I did that too. And when I used to train, I would always do something in between. I'd do a leg exercise and immediately go to a chest exercise. And there was no rest, And I could, it almost became like an aerobic type of weight training, which I realized, and I was lean again, but I don't think anything was shifting. I did become, I was very fit, and very fit people are usually going to have lower BMR, lower resting metabolic rates, and they're going to have lower pulse. That's kind of what a trade-off is, so you just have to learn to balance that.
So there's barely any research on this. Basically, the amount of time between workouts. As we were discussing before, there's all these programs, these workout programs that you'll find online or the ones that you pay for, and they have this set amount of days, like whether it's 4 days a week, 3 days a week. They all basically tell you, like, train until you feel like you need a deload, which, in my experience, by the time you feel like you need a deload, it's already too late. So there's an article there's a guy named he's like a massage therapist, but he has amazing research reviews. His name's Paul Ingraham. And he talked about like how much exercise people actually need, and some of the research that he shows is that one set of something gives you the most bang for your buck, and then 2 and 3, you get a little bit more after that, but every set further, it's just like diminishing returns.
Right.
And then, you'll reach a point where I guess it's person specific, but say like 10 sets of an exercise where after the 10th set, there's like no point in doing it anymore.
Right.
So his whole theory was that the average person who's not like a triathlete, who's not a bodybuilder, can get by on these like minimalist, very short workouts and can gain strength. So one person that's inspired me, and I've totally changed my whole like approach to working out. There's a he's not a popular YouTuber. He barely posts any videos. It's like every 6 months. Um, but his YouTube channel's Bastion Head, and he basically does he has a 4-day rotation where he'll do like 2 main compound exercises, and he'll cycle them like anywhere from every 12 days to every 18 days. So to give you context, if you do a heavy squat workout, like you may not squat until like 12 or 18 days later. And he like brings his logs, he shows you on the YouTube video like all his logs of training, and he's like, look, this is what I've found. When I was younger, I just didn't get any results by training like the same muscle group multiple times a week. And it was only until I spread them out that I actually felt motivated to train again. And so I don't know if you found anything like that. I know that there's not a lot of research in it, but I've found it very successful for me personally. And it's kind of goes along the lines of less is more kind of mentality.
I mean, I wouldn't disagree with him. I train some people once a week, and
Right.
we continually create gains with that once a week. So I definitely, and when it comes to strength, I mean, I train a 60-year-old woman that can deadlift more than most everyone else at the gym, and she works out 1 time a week, and we just add another one and add each time. And so it's a gradual increase, but she never loses anything and increases it each week. So I would definitely agree with that.
Okay.
That it is such a lesson. And I think, especially in the training world, because you're like, hey, I train my client 2 to 3 times a week, right? So, and I think some people just feel better with doing movement. I like to do, I do Z Health, which is a lot of neurology kind of things to help with movement and balance and so forth. So I always integrate that into the workout and kind of do like some major 4 different exercises in the day, along with other movements and body work and so forth. But yeah, I mean, my workouts and what I used to do before have significantly changed to the thought of less is more. I don't want to be spending. I was such a gym rat. I was in there for hours and hours, and that's what I thought it took. And I don't believe it does. And I think you can get away with much less. And if you enjoy doing more and that makes you happy, then I think you should do that.
And it kind of goes along the lines of it depends where somebody is metabolically too.
Always.
So you have that, plus you also have the fact that if somebody's strength training, like for me, when I was squatting, like, just the bar, or like the bar plus like 25 pounds on either side, I could train squats 3 times a week and recover. But now that I have a lot more weight, recovery takes a lot longer, and so I think a lot of people get discouraged when they get stronger because as the amount of weight that they have on the bar increases, their recovery takes longer, and in their heads they're probably thinking, oh, I'm just getting old. But the reality is, yes, you may be getting older, but the nervous system, the joints, everything has to take that much longer to recover because of how heavy you've adapted.
Yeah, I think you have to take, I get a heavy strength training workout is a huge nervous system stress. People just think it's muscular. It is not. I mean, how your body moves is all nervous system. So that has to get a lot of feedback, and when you load it a lot, which means it takes a lot of glucose.
Right. And then the other thing I have noticed as well is, and I can't remember the specifics right now, but there's like a collagen cycle. So it takes a certain amount of days for our collagen to recover. It like breaks down and rebuilds again. And a lot of people push these high frequency workouts as like the be all end all of training, but because I guess the theory is that your body can recover every 48 hours. So if you hit it multiple times a week, then you'll have more times where you're going through protein, what's it called? Protein synthesis. So like more times. But a lot of times they neglect the fact that your joints, everything, that actually takes longer than 48 hours in many circumstances. So like I've found is if I have tried to do heavy workouts frequently, like I'll start getting joint pain and things like that, like overuse injuries. So have you seen that as well?
I mean, certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in anyone that overtrains, you can start to see more injury for sure. And again, it depends on that individual, their age, their health, what they're doing, their stress load, everything. Just the strength training is one variable involved in their entire life. So. And that's why it's important to take, when you look at different programs, as how they're explaining what is right and wrong, you have to still consider your whole life and what's stressing. And that's why temperature and pulse is so good, because then you can kind of balance it and see if what you're doing is optimal. Because, a heavy strength training program needs a very good, strong foundation of nutrition, or you're just going to hurt yourself and do damage.
Okay. And then one thing I wanted to ask you about, so what do you think is a good barometer? Like, how do you gauge when it's okay to train like the same muscle group again? I mean, I guess if you're on a once a week cycle, but
I think it depends on a lot about what you're looking, because as much as you can train a muscle group once every 7 days, if you're going super, super heavy, if you're not going super heavy and you're working a little more with agility, and let's say you're using kettlebells and doing range of motion, you can do that every single day, right?
Okay.
Because the entire theory of whatever you do weight training, you have to wait 48 hours to do that muscle group. Doesn't help. I mean, because you can look at people like gymnasts who train their full body every single day, 6 days a week for 1 million hours. Now, I'm not going to say they're the most healthy or whatnot, but they still have a lot of growth. Right. And they still are very strong. And their joints are quite good at that age group, at that age level. So what is right for someone, and when you should train again based on what is, I mean, if you're still sore on some level and you're looking for a lot of growth and you don't like working out that much, then you can wait probably a whole week and not do it. If you really enjoy it, then, and you're not sore, then you can do probably the next day, as long as you're not killing yourself.
Right. Yeah, I mean, looking back, I wish I knew then what I know now, but a lot of people, they try to keep doing these like basic strength training programs like starting strength, and they do them way too long. So like for me, that was why I ended up getting into overtraining, because it's a 5x5 or a 3x, what is starting strength? Well, I did the 5x5 program and ran it as long as I could, but before you know it, you're using such heavy weights that 5x5 is like, it's extremely taxing. So, and I think that's where there's this disconnect, and that's like you squat like 3 times a week. So I think there's not enough people talking about the fact that there's only so long that somebody can actually squat 3 times a week and continue to increase their weight before they either have to, cut back on the volume or the intensity. And like my philosophy is, if you do a program like that, like exploit your noob gains as long as possible, but then as soon as you start feeling like it's really difficult to recover, maybe you should cut back. Have you?
Yeah. And I think you should also have like a week of recovery, so depending on how far you're going, usually it's like you might increase for 3 weeks and then do a recovery week to give your body a little bit break and then start back up again.
Right.
So a lot of people do that kind of cycle. But I always believe you have to know your body. You have to know that when there's a time to push it, because sometimes you might need a little extra push to get through it. And there's also a time to know when, you have to take your day into consideration. So if you're going in there for a heavy day and you've had a horrible day with crappy sleep and you're super stressed, probably not the best time to do it. You're just going to push yourself into a bad place.
Okay. Now, I know that you, and a couple other podcasts that I saw with you, you had mentioned that some of the clients that you see that are broken, you actually recommend that they take like a long time off of all exercise, or they just do yoga or something like that.
Absolutely.
So I get a lot of, which is something that I've been incorporating as well into my practice, which definitely helps people with excessive exercise background. But I keep getting the same, everybody's so afraid that they're going to like lose all their gains or they're going to lose their strength. And I haven't found that to be the case at all. So I was wondering what your take on that is.
Yeah, and that was definitely, I had a massive fear of taking time off. I mean, I was the person that would go on vacation and work out. And until I literally took time off, I mean, I've taken months off at this point in time and not been in the gym and lost very little, very little. I mean, I wouldn't go right back into what the weights I was using, but it doesn't take long to get right back there. And physically, I wouldn't look any different.
Yeah.
So that, and of course, that's assuming that I'm maintaining a good diet. Now, if you're in a stressed state and you're basically in that catabolic state, then you can lose muscle tissue much faster.
Right.
People always sit there and go, I'm stressed and I'm not working out, and it's because I'm not working out, I'm losing muscle. And I'm like, no, it's really because you're stressed and you're not eating enough, your body's become catabolic, and that's why you're losing muscle.
Yeah.
It's not because you're not working out. If you're supporting yourself nutritionally, you can take a lot of time off and not lose any muscle mass. That's at least what I have found.
Right. And I've found that in myself. But like a good analogy is I've taken off months at a time as well. And there was one year when I took off like a month and a half during the summer and kind of just hung out at the beach and, went to work, but didn't really, didn't do any exercise afterwards, just kind of took it easy. And I maintained my weight, my diet and everything, and then came back into the gym and I literally was right back where I was. Didn't lose heart. Like, I think it took like 1 or 2 workouts to get back versus, I think this was, it was last summer. My wife and I, we went hiking for, it was only 10 days, but we didn't bring enough food with us, and I lost like 10 pounds. And I tried, coming back into the gym, it took me a good while to get my strength back because of how depleted I was.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if you're not eating enough, and that's when people, they'll get sick and they don't work out, and they might lose muscle tissue because they couldn't eat for 10 days. And they're like, I lost muscle again because I didn't work out. And I'm like, no, it's not why you lost muscle. It's because you didn't eat enough and your body broke it down to maintain your living. And so you could have enough running glucose through your system, So when you understand that, because like I said, like you, I've taken months off. And this, this was a super challenge for me because I was a little bit of a head case when it came to working out. But when you actually did it, it was like, wow, look at it. All these years I was stressing about vacations and I, didn't need to work out at all. I would have been better off had I not done anything. And actually, all my clients were like, don't work out when you go on vacation. You don't need to. Enjoy it. And all of them will lose weight. They, they de-stress. I mean, your body needs rest. Even when you're doing your workouts, you need time off. Your body will respond better.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as the Ray Peat, he doesn't have a diet per se, but I've noticed a lot of people will follow his principles. So they'll get enough protein, calcium to phosphorus ratio, decrease the PUFA intake, things like that. But they still find that they have a lot of hormonal issues. And one of the things I notice is they're focused on nutrition, but they're not thinking about the other aspects of their life. Like maybe they're not getting enough sun, they're working 80 hours a week. So what's your take on that when it comes to just being focused on the diet and not
the rest of it?
Yeah.
Nutrition is big, but I would say it's maybe 30-40% of the equation. And if you are overstressed, overworked, unhappy, in a crappy relationship, all of those are, and then eating properly, I mean, they might help you survive, but they are not going to help you thrive. And so what I have found with people is when they come, they have a whole slew of issues. And, I don't really address them, but as we start helping them support their life through nutrition, what starts happening is we start peeling the layers. So all of a sudden a new awareness is going to be created because like, I'm feeling better, but, and what will start nagging them, but, they realize that they have this horrible job and they hate it and they're spending half their life in this place where they're miserable. And that's gonna play an effect on your body, right? Unhappiness is going to basically mimic a low thyroid state. So, you can, and I always tell people, it's like, if your life is miserable or you're unhappy or you're super stressed out, a good nutrition is like wearing a bulletproof vest and you're still going out into the war zone, right? It's going to help, but you need to get out of the war zone. And
back when I had low testosterone, and I was following all these strict diets, one observation that I made, and Avishek made as well from Stop Being Confused About Health, we kind of had that same epiphany is we would look around, I would look around at people who are couch potatoes or people who are smoking and drinking and notice that, they seem to be happy, they seem to have no issues. And so that kind of explains that. Like, people who are low stress can get away with a lot of poor nutrition or poor lifestyle choices.
Yeah, and I think they've shown one of the biggest contributor to early death is loneliness and unhappiness, and so those are huge factors to living a shorter life. So if we're looking at longevity and improving health, then we have to address everything. Nutrition is important for sure on hormonal and digestion and all of these, but again, we have to look at the whole package, and so you have to address the other situations in your life that might be creating an unhappy world for you.
Okay. So I know I've taken up a lot of your time. I don't want to go too much longer for your sake, but I know you had to listen to me ramble. But so one thing I wanted to ask you was, so for myself and a lot of people I work with is we feel so much better in the summer. What are the mechanisms behind this? Because a lot of people are confused about like why that is, why that's the case. They automatically ascribe it to be because they've gone on vacation or whatever, but it goes a little bit deeper, I feel like.
Well, you can always think that light is less stressful. Darkness is stressful for the body. You have hormonal changes when it's dark versus light. That's why we're programmed to sleep during the dark hours, because it actually is more stressful. That's why I think there's more heart attacks in the morning waking hours than any other time in the day for anybody. I mean, for a state of heart attacks, it's that, the darkness time. So, light, it essentially helps improve metabolism. It increases T3 levels. Most people, if they take thyroid, I know Ray Peters talked about this, he needs about 4 times as much thyroid in the winter months versus the summer months. So, and I think it also has just something to do with lifestyle. You're out more in the summer months. You have less clothing on in the summer month. There's more to do. You're more social. But yeah, ultimately, sun is an important piece of the hormonal cascade. You need it for optimal thyroid function. You need it for optimal hormone function.
So for me personally, I test my hormones multiple times a year, and I can tell you always at the end of the summer, like early fall, is when my sex hormones are at their best. And personally, I believe, you're getting the vitamin D, but you're also getting that spectrum of red light that Ray P talks about. I think he talked about birds who, in the winter, if you shine light on them, they start mating and things like they exhibit this behavior.
Right.
So, absolutely. So I want to say thank you for that. You really opened up my mind more about like what exercise, the ins and outs of how it can affect the metabolic rate, and how people can come with a damaged metabolism and sift their way to the right track. So,
my pleasure.
Do you have any closing statements or anything that you want to tell people about how exercise can affect hormones or stress levels, things like that?
I would just say that become your own best experimenter on yourself, and a good way to do that is to food log, take temperature and pulse. I highly recommend using the app chronometer.com. It's a free app that you can record all your food in, and then you can also record your temp and pulse, and it gives you a lot of feedback. I definitely believe you need feedback when you start to go through a healing process, and not just eat certain foods or even the foods that Ray Peat recommends, because a lot of people do that and they don't have any gauge as to really what's happening or what they're doing and if it's helping or not helping. So you really need to record things, and the more information you can give yourself, and then you can look at it, then you can start to see patterns, and or if you don't see patterns, then you can give it to someone to help you, and if you need help, hire somebody to help you, because there's a lot to understand, and this is a huge shift in our way that we've been handling things in the fitness and health world for the last 100 years. And so, it's important to when you go through a healing process to understand what's happening to your body, what you should be experiencing, should you be exercising, should you not, and, taking all that into consideration.
Okay. So, how do people get in contact with you? How do people find you?
They can go to my website, which is Kate Deering, Kate, Deering, DeeringG.com. Although I don't hang out there very often, I'm usually on my Facebook page, which is Kate Deering Fitness. So I post daily on there, and there's always a conversation going on. Of course, if they would love to read my book, you can buy it on Amazon. It's How to Heal Your Metabolism. And again, on my Facebook page, there's always information about metabolism, working out, food, and so forth, and that's, of course, free of charge.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you again, and I want to let everybody know that Kate's book has been a huge help to me, even after years of reading Ray Peat. His information is so complex that you could read and reread his articles over and over again for a lifetime and still, not
Totally.
be able to understand everything. So I probably read your book at least once every 8 months or so, just to remind myself of all that, in addition to reading Ray's articles. So definitely check out Kate's book, and also, if you ever find time or you're bored at work and the boss isn't looking, try to read some of Ray's articles. So
I highly recommend them. Absolutely.